I'm Knox Ross. I'm chairman of the Southern Rail Commission. It's a delight to be here today. I'm going to talk to you a minute about the Southern Rail Commission and why we've gotten to this point of success. And then I'm going to talk about our three major projects that we have and conclude with our I-20 efforts at the end to lead into the remarks that Judge Anderson has. But I serve as chairman of the Southern Rail Commission. It's an exciting time for us as we are very near implementing service on several of our routes. Let's see, yep. Okay, doesn't matter. The commission was formed in 1982 as an act of Congress as an interstate compact among the states of Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana to promote passenger and the freight service in our states. We consist of 6 commissioners from each state. We are appointed by our governors. Our governors serve as a member of our commissions. We are uncompensated. However, we have a modest budget that's provided by our individual states to support our work, which is very important. That allows us to be able to hire policy advisors, to hire promotional people to be able to help us to do our work. It puts us in a unique role to support passenger train development in our states. We have the ability to apply for federal support, engage in planning and development for rail services, and ultimately be the operator of those services. This gives the Commission great leverage in working with our partners at Amtrak, the host carriers, the FRA, and our member states. These, along with the longevity of the Commission, have given us the ability to achieve the successes that we are enjoying today. Before I move to the current status of each of our projects, I would like to briefly tell you why we are enjoying the success and on the cusp of actual operation of new service, and I hope that you can find some things in here that you can take with you to help start and jumpstart your services here in Texas. Central to this effort have been our political champions. These champions, starting with the late Senator Thad Cochran of Mississippi, Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, and Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, have been critical in giving us the legitimacy, the funding, and the policy to be successful. Through these senators, we've made other senator friends, such as Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, other U.S. senators and representatives in key leadership roles like leaders of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the Commerce Committee, and so forth in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate. We have support from the Mississippi and Louisiana Departments of Transportation, many of our state elected officials. Some great examples of that are Governor Edwards in Louisiana, who's been a stalwart supporter of ours, our Transportation Commissioner Willie Simmons, and Senator Bryce Wiggins in Mississippi, Representative Charles Busby in Mississippi, which we hope will be our next MDOT Commissioner from the South, and Speaker Snexnader, Representative Francis Thompson, and Representative Eccles in Louisiana, just to give you a few examples of we've been able to cultivate not only federal champions, but state champions as well. This extends to the Amtrak Executive Leadership Team, our friends at the FRA, including Amit Bose, who has been a great friend to us since he came into office, and we really appreciate them. All of these have played a critical role in securing the funding necessary and also changing the culture and direction of passenger rail development. We are also indebted to the work of our policy advisor, John Robert Smith, and his staff at Transportation America, as well as our friend Jim Matthews at Rail Passengers and his staff. And I'll talk a little bit about him in a moment. There are so many others who have labored for years, like Judge Anderson in this room, who are owed a sincere thank you for their persistent and continued work toward a goal of better passenger rail and freight operation. Now let's look at the projects we're working on. And if I can go to that next slide, it just gives you an overall map. Okay, we'll figure it out. You'll see it. First, the project's closest to completion is New Orleans to Mobile. Many of you have followed the drama that has surrounded this effort for some time. I appreciate the hard work and wisdom shown by the Surface Transportation Board in leading us to a workable solution. I am pleased to be able to say that we now have all local and state funding secured. All stations other than Mobile are ready to receive passengers, and work is underway for the implementation of a platform facility in Mobile. This has been a gargantuan effort that Amtrak has taken the lead on, that our friends at the host railroads have worked with us closely, and we've got a way forward, which is tremendous after a lot of you saw all the different things that were said about each other in the press over the last few years. We hope to see service by the fall. However, there are a few items outside of our control that have to be completed for service to be implemented. A great deal of the work was done by Amtrak and our host railroad partners to come to this agreement that will not only bring passenger service to our Gulf Coast, but I think very importantly is that will result in a railroad that is ready to meet the demands of 21st century freight railroading. This agreement is an opportunity for all parties to show how we can use the historic levels of federal support, not only to bring the passenger service that our communities desire, but the freight capacity and fluidity that modern freight railroading in our economy demands. We will work diligently with our partners to deliver just that. Our agreement will also allow for extensive investments in station areas in our Mississippi communities, and we are working closely in this coming week, in fact, with our local tourism promotion organizations and business interests to make this service a success from day one. To say we're excited about this is an understatement. We're ready to roll some trains, and we hope to do that this fall. The next project that is in a similar state of readiness is Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Like the I-20 corridor, this project was not thought to be possible until the recent completed merger of Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern. As many of you are aware, CP and Amtrak entered into an extensive agreement regarding passenger rail operation expansion across the combined CP system, which resulted in Amtrak and the SRC giving the merger their enthusiastic support. With the direct support of Canadian Pacific, the cities of Gonzales and Baton Rouge in Louisiana were secured raised grants to construct stations in their cities. And I think significantly, this is one of the first times that cities have been awarded a grant that don't have passenger rail service yet. That shows the confidence that FRA and DOT have in our efforts. And this is a testament to the relationships we have developed over many years with Amtrak and the FRA and are developing with Canadian Pacific. The state of Louisiana has started the environmental reviews required and will soon implement the capacity studies required with full cooperation of Amtrak and Canadian Pacific, which is a must if we have an accurate view of what's needed to be done on that railroad. Louisiana is also applying for a CRISI grant for the replacement of the 1930s Bonnie Carey Spillway, and we are working with the leadership at the Louis Armstrong Airport to develop a stop on the route to serve the airport, which will be a true multimodal, and they're very excited about that. We can say now with confidence, service between Baton Rouge and New Orleans will happen, and this will be a great connection to our Mobile to New Orleans service. As a part of this, we will also be studying extending the service on to Shreveport to connect North and South Louisiana to the I-20 corridor. So let's get on to what you came to hear about, which is the I-20. The history of this effort stretches back to the takeover of the Mid-South Rail by Kansas City Southern, and there was a time that service was contemplated and actually crews were being hired. I met a gentleman that was hired to run the I-20 service, still working for Amtrak. However, this was not to be, and the idea of this service was kept alive by many advocates, many of you here in this room, but to no avail. Again, the CP-KCS merger and leadership by Amtrak, especially our friend Nicole Busich, changed that outlook. In the merger agreement, CP has agreed to cooperate on a study of what is needed to implement service with a 2-year time frame for merger implementation. Also, CP is committed to assist in working with other hosts on this route. Now, that's not a guarantee of service, but it's a major step forward in the goal of implementing this service. And we have everybody working hard to that goal. As a result, the cities of Vicksburg, Mississippi, Monroe, Ruston, and Shreveport-Bossier, under the leadership of Mayor Friday Ellis of Monroe, formed an interlocal partnership to apply for a federal-state partnership grant to support the planning and implementation of service on this route. Louisiana DOTD has also applied for a CRISI grant to evaluate infrastructure needs. These cities worked diligently to advance this grant proposal, so much that Amtrak, with the encouragement of the FRA, became the lead applicant for this grant with the support of the Southern Rail Commission. This is a remarkable step forward for Amtrak. I can't really overestimate how important this particular part is, and Amtrak's getting behind a expansion of the long-distance network. That is a huge step forward for them. This is something that we all thought that this would be unthinkable just a short time ago. In contrast to the aforementioned state-supported services, this route's operating costs will be supported by Amtrak, making it very attractive to our states. They are also supporting the application of robust corridor development identification plan grant proposals for the I-20 and Mobile to New Orleans. And the SRC is involved in others, such as New Orleans to Jacksonville, that's being done by the city of Pensacola, Baton Rouge to New Orleans, which is being handled by Louisiana DOTD, and we also submitted a corridor ID grant proposal for Shreveport to Baton Rouge. Jim Matthews and the RPA have been engaged in a key support effort for these grants and the federal state grant using their proprietary economic impact modeling of all of these routes. So if you're a part of the RPA, you can be very proud of the work product they're putting out that's supporting this effort. It's very important to be able to show the economic impact of these routes. We're working closely with the Louisiana, Mississippi DOTs on this project, and they've been our close partner. In this project, we have a champion, Senator Cassidy. Bill Cassidy is our champion, who has devoted substantial staff and personal time to this effort, as well as Senator Hyde Smith of Mississippi. And as I've said before, having political champions is the key to this success. If we did not have Senator Wicker, we did not have Senator Cassidy, we would not be here. That's just bottom line. We'd still be just talking about it. We're excited about the possibilities of I-20 service and a new and expanded partnership with our friends at Amtrak. It's important to note, with regard to this service, it allows for a connection with the city of New Orleans and Jackson, the Texas Eagle, and the Heartland Flyer in Fort Worth. It's great connectivity across the middle of the country. In closing, I would like to emphasize the importance of champions and trusted relationships, which have to be developed over time. As unlikely as it sounds, Mississippi and Louisiana are leading the way in passenger rail development in this country. And I keep thinking I'm going to wake up from this dream. They're going to say, I was hoping this wasn't an April Fool, okay? And that example of Mississippi and Louisiana will have to be replicated in states like Texas if we are to be successful on projects like the I-20, the 7-day sunset, and others, the Texas Triangle. We also have to rethink and refine our relationships with and attitudes toward our partners at Amtrak and the host railroads. We have found that they are responding to the availability of capital and the changing attitudes and desires of the traveling public. We have gone to great lengths to try to understand the needs and requirements of both Amtrak and our host railroad friends, and are working diligently to meet as many of those as we can. The SRC has long held that these projects must work for all parties, and especially given the unfortunate events of recent months. All of us in the industry need to work together to make sure railroading is as safe and efficient as possible. We have a grand opportunity before us to provide not only the best passenger service possible, but to use this opportunity to make our freight services the economic driver they need to be for our communities. This is a new day, and we all need to take advantage of it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, I guess this is our 6th or 7th time to appear at Texas Rail Advocates to brief you on the I-20 Council Corridor. And I would like, similar to what Knox Ross has just said, express appreciation to the many people that have helped to make this possible. Next slide, please. This is a description of the route, which you've seen this slide before, but it's connecting 341 miles between Marshall, Texas, and Meridian, Mississippi, which is on existing track, which would essentially connect Fort Worth with Atlanta. That's 8.2 million people in DFW Metro and 7 million people in Atlanta. Those are respectively the 4th and 9th largest metropolitan areas in the country, and the fastest growing. We hope that the Texas corridor, which would connect the 7 million people in Houston with DFW, can be resurrected. There are efforts underway now to make that happen. But significantly, in November of 2021, as Jim Matthews pointed out, it's the largest funding bill in the history of Amtrak. It is the largest transportation funding bill since the passage of the Interstate Highway Act in 1954. So these are, Jim used the term transcendent times or transformative times. They are in fact. They are in fact. And you who are living here now and have been attending this conference over the years have come to appreciate those efforts. And we appreciate your support. Next slide, please. As I said, this is 345 miles. We call it you've heard of the missing link? Okay. This is the, quote, missing link. But again, that's on existing track. And as Knox has pointed out, this was operated by KCS, and for years they just refused to talk with us. And with the merger of CP and CP's acquisition of KCS, which we worked on and supported and filed a brief in support of in April of last year, that is now, come to fruition. Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, with whom I served in the Texas Senate before she went to Washington, she was instrumental in bringing Amtrak around with a suggestion that Amtrak speak with Canadian Pacific and obtain an agreement from them to work on passenger rail as a condition of her writing a letter to the Surface Transportation Board, before which those proceedings were pending, and encouraging them to approve the merger. That Zoom conference call took place in August, and in December, Canadian Pacific and Amtrak signed the agreement that Knox Ross was talking about. Next slide, please. So the corridor designation program, we recently filed, did ETCOG, East Texas Council of Governments, and North Central Texas Council of Governments, the DFW Council of Governments, and the one in East Texas, which takes us from, it takes the Texas portion of this line, because as Knox has pointed out, I mean, they have been working with the senators in Louisiana, one of them, Cassidy, Hyde Smith in Alabama, and Wicker in Mississippi. And they have been steadfast, supporters. And Southern Rail is to be complimented on bringing them to the table. We haven't had quite that luck with our senators here in Texas, but hope springs eternal. But we've been working in the vineyards with our local governments, our council of governments, and you'll see down here. Okay, and this coalition, we started this in 2007 by bringing together North Central Texas and the East Texas Council of Governments. The following year, we reached over into Louisiana and brought in the Northwest Louisiana Council of Governments. And the following year, in 2009, we brought in the North Delta. That gave us a string of 4 councils of government stretching back to back from Fort Worth to Vicksburg. Southern Rail at that point was working to develop Mississippi. And you see in this second slide, no, back please. Yes, we've got representatives of Southern Rail, they signed on a resolution of support in 2014 for the I-20 Corridor Council. And so we appreciate their long-standing support for this. And in February of last year, they added the I-20 Corridor Council as a point of emphasis for them. They had been working to restore traffic or passenger lines between New Orleans and Mobile after Katrina. And so they were successful in getting that route back on track after, what, 17 years? Yeah, so I was talking to Rich here from Abilene the other day, just this afternoon, and we talked about how water projects and transportation projects have a very long developing time. But, you know, we're well on our way on that. And the feasibility and capacity studies were completed with monies obtained from Senator K. Hutchinson of Texas, who was involved. And we used that to complete studies all across Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi, showing that Amtrak made money on this, number one, and that the cost of improvements on this so as not to impair the freight line traffic was something approaching $82 million in 2017 dollars. So the passage of the IIJA or the BIL and the merger of CP has put us in a very strong position moving forward to go ahead with this improvement project. Next, please. So again, since 2007, the grassroots efforts have been a parallel strategy of reaching out to working with councils of government, local, state, and federal elected officials to build and sustain a strong multi-state coalition of support, and continually working to determine what will make the track economically viable and determining the cost of existing track without an impediment to freight traffic. Next, please. These are some of our participants. You see I-20 Corridor Council, North Central Texas Council of Governments. There's Senator Hutchison, Amtrak, rail passengers, Texas Department of Transportation, East Texas Council of Governments, Tempo, North Delta, North Louisiana, Texas Rail Advocates, the Regional Transportation Council, and the Coordination and Development Council, and obviously Southern Rail Commission. Jim Matthews, you've heard with Rail Passenger, he's the president. Jim, stand up. Let's give him a round of applause. He came from DC to be with us. We're also honored to have actually a table of representatives, but I'll recognize one in particular who has worked to make this happen. And sometimes his boss wasn't always willing to step up, but now they are. Todd Stennis, would you stand up, please? So this shows, and Christina did this, as she puts coordination and collaboration, and probably the most important ingredient of that is a liberal dosage of persistence. Okay, and that has its own rewards. Next, please. So the time is now. And again, the completion or the near completion of the New Orleans to Mobile route has afforded Southern Rail Commission the ability to come up here and to help across North Louisiana. And again, the East Texas Council of Governments and North Central Texas Council of Governments have filed a corridor designation covering the Texas portion of this route, because Texas is not a member of the Southern Rail Commission. But in working together with these, we think that we can bring together a regional rail plan to reestablish passenger rail traffic across the southern United States. Next, please. Okay, we don't have a thank you and end, so I'll just say this. We thank you for your attention. We thank you for your long-lasting support. Peter, thank you for sponsoring this. It's always a very productive event, and we appreciate everyone here for their continuing support for this vital rail link across the southern United States. Thank you very much.